Okay, Apple just recently had the keynote where they announced their new generation of MacBook Airs and Mac Minis, MacBook Pros, with their custom Apple M1 chip. And in this video, I want to talk quickly about some little stuff that Apple didn't mention, and also try to kind of ask the questions why certain things are not there, what is Apple obfuscating, and stuff like that. So let's quickly jump right into sort of important stuff. That is the claims that Apple is making about their performance boosts, up to 3.9 times faster video processing, 7.9 times faster image processing. So let's just quickly go into their footnotes and see how they're doing this, and see how their marketing bullshit is going in with this case, in this case, to the next level, basically. So when they're comparing first footnote, 3.9 faster video editing, they're doing this and they're comparing pre-production MacBook Air with M1 chip versus quad-core Intel from the previous, basically now generation. They're using Final Cut 10.5 that I believe now it's been released, and they're editing DCI 4K RAW file at 60 FPS, which is really impressive, to be honest. But this is what they're doing. So they're comparing MacBook Air, right? When they're comparing second, and put in a second number here, right? They're conducting their test using Mac Mini and comparing it to the quad-core Intel i3, not i5, not i7. Okay, so just immediately, just as we start, we can already see that Apple is doing their very famous marketing mumbo jumbo bullshit when they're literally when they're showing you, they're speaking about one product, one chip, right? Not one product, but one chip. And they're telling you two absolutely different metrics. Because if you're gonna buy, like, say, MacBook Air, you're gonna expect this like almost 4 times video editing and image processing. But in fact, they're talking about different things, just so we're clear, right? Because Apple doesn't want you to know it, or at least like they don't want you to clearly know it, okay? So there's that. They're using this like architecture with 2 high performance cores, 2 high efficiency cores. They don't state any sort of TDP or any clock speeds. So we don't know how those things are running. Nobody knows. One thing that if you see how Apple is sort of comparing in like CPU performance versus power and stuff like this, they're saying multi-threaded performance measured using select industry standard benchmarks. No specifications of what kind of industry standard benchmarks that is. Is it Unigine Heaven? Is it like Geekbench? Nothing. Comparison made against latest generation high performance notebooks commercially available at the time of testing. Like, this sentence cannot be more vague, because latest generation high performance notebooks, not ultrabooks, right? They're comparing it to notebooks, which is supposed to be different category, right? So latest generation high performance notebooks, in my view, also include something like freaking hyper, like, I don't know, like 8-core Intel processor with like GTX 1070 or 1080. Are they comparing it to this? Like, is this M1 chip gonna beat 1080 in like image processing or gaming sort of performance? That weird as fuck. And it's the same story across this whole footnotes. Industry standard benchmarks and some unspecified latest generation high performance notebooks. The only thing that they're doing sort of, at least more or less honestly, is when we're going to like specific models. When we go to something like a MacBook Pro, to like a footnote about graphic performance, and just to, you know, check what they're talking about, they're conducting these tests using 13-inch MacBook Pro with M1 chip and comparing it to quad-core i7 model of, you know, previous generation MacBook Pros, and they're doing with like Iris Plus graphics. But I think there was a better graphics. Am I wrong? And they're always using 16 gigs of RAM and 2 terabyte SSD. So also slightly misleading, because again, how many people read those things? not that many. So again, they're doing this slightly disingenuous thing, in my mind at least, when they are, for example, stating on their page, on the in the shop, on the buy page, Apple M1 chip with 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, and 16-core neural engine. Somebody who's not like really tech savvy, they would see like, oh, 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, and 16-core neural engine. Oh, that sounds cool. That sounds a lot of cores. But in fact, what this neural engine does, to be honest, who knows? It says like on this like promotional page, Final Cut can intelligently frame a clip, or Pixelmator can magically increase sharpness and detail. Like, how many times are you doing those tasks? Let's talk about like more serious stuff. All these new computers have only 2 Thunderbolt/USB 4 ports. Now it's USB 4, not USB 3, but it's the same USB-C like connector. Only 2 of them. And you can connect only 1 monitor to these things, which is not particularly sort of, Apple didn't advertise this. To Mac Mini, apparently you can connect 1 monitor to HDMI and another monitor to USB-C port. But apparently, at least by the looks of it, new MacBook Airs and MacBook Pros can only connect 1 monitor. Only 1, while the previous generation of Intel computers could connect up to 2 4K monitors. So even if you have like 1080p monitor, apparently, I want some clarification on this one, because if it can run 6K at 60 Hz, I'm pretty sure it has a lot of power to run like 2 1080p screens, let's say, or 1440p screens. I need clarification on this, because otherwise it's gonna be mind-blowingly stupid, because I know for a fact that MacBook Pros, like 13-inch models, some developers use them, and I've seen developers just like have their MacBooks like in a clamshell mode, and it's just sitting somewhere on a table, and they have like couple monitors, maybe one reverted, one like widescreen, maybe even 3rd monitor sometimes, because one would be like just strictly for code, another one will be like for their own activities, and another one will be like sort of for documentation and all those stuff. And since they advertise their MacBooks to be like so developer friendly, and you're gonna be able to, they use developers so much in those like in the keynote, that is crazy. If you could only use 1 monitor, that would be like a no-go from the start. Like, why would you buy a computer where you cannot connect like 2 monitors? Like, what is this shit? Which year are we in? What the fuck? Then apparently they're ditching support for external GPUs, which is also another thing which is mind-boggling to me. So just as AMD releasing their great GPUs that are like comparable to NVIDIA's in performance, now they have ray tracing. It's a good price and everything, right? So you'd expect Apple to support all those things, right? In Mac Pros, right? So like now finally, like game designers and graphic designers could accelerate like ray tracing and use ray tracing on Macs using new AMD video cards. But apparently with MacBooks, you are not able to do this. And if this is how the way are sort of heading, which direction they're heading, it means that probably Apple will ditch the support for graphics card altogether, which is external cards altogether, or at least this is like really like real possibility, which would be complete disaster, because then we would be reliant only and solely on whatever Apple implements in their own GPUs, and like who knows what they're gonna do. There's going to be no competition whatsoever, and there is going to be no pressure whatsoever, external pressure, for Apple to actually put stuff inside that people need. Because, for example, this ray tracing technology, I didn't hear anything about it on Apple's silicon whatsoever. Okay, cool then, right? So as we talked about the only 2 USB 4 ports, there are only 16 gigs of unified memory, whatever that means, right? I'm using 16 gigs of memory right now, and I'm constantly out of memory. 16 gigs of memory, especially for like intensive tasks, is not enough on macOS just because of the way how it is designed, how it always tries to consume all the available memory and leave you like nothing, basically, versus like Windows, where it's pretty okay with like management of the memory. It sort of leaves a lot. You can say it's just like wasting memory, not using it, but I feel like it's giving you sort of options to not be swapping constantly to disk when you actually need to quickly access some large amounts of memory, when you're like opening and then editing like large Photoshop file or a video editing software, something like that. So only 16 gigs of memory is crazy that this is the cutoff point, because on previous generation Intel, those shitty computers that nobody likes anymore, they could have you could have spec'd out up to 32 gigs of really fast LPDDR4X at like 3.7 gigahertz, which is crazy. Then again, those new M1 chip MacBooks are limited to 2 terabytes. MacBooks and Mac Mini limited to 2 terabytes of storage, so you can't go to 4 terabytes. I know that the amount of money that Apple was asking for this is exorbitant. It's like, it's a crime to ask so much, but there is not even an option for this anymore. So that's also interesting. So obviously I can't go like without saying that the battery life is amazing on this. If it's anything like they're claiming, if it's like literally 17 and 20 hours on MacBook Pros, this is crazy performance. From my experience, I would probably say that you should knock down like at least 3 hours out of those claims that Apple has, because all the MacBooks I've used, if they're claiming like 8 hours, you get about 6 hours. If they're claiming, like 10, whatever, you get about 7, 8. So I would say probably minus 2-3 hours, definitely. Not sure, but we'll see, because it's a new architecture. Maybe they've made some great improvements. Who knows, right? What else? Well, they've actually did something weird. They changed the keyboard on the MacBook Air, so now you don't have control of your backlit keyboards, of backlighting. I'm assuming it's been moved into like Big Sur, into like their new sort of control center thingy. I don't particularly agree with this, because they added like a do not disturb button, which is like, really? Is this the most important button? So with this change, it feels like the value of the touch bar is actually increased, because you can at least customize it, as far as I know, right? So that's also weird. The MacBook Air, by the way, has a bit shittier display, or at least, I don't know if it's shittier, but at least it is less bright than MacBook Pro 400 versus 500 nits. So if you want brighter display, you should go to MacBook Pro. And also this battery life they're claiming is basically conducted at like middle ground. I think they're stating that it is like 8 points from the bottom and 8 clicks from the bottom. I think it's in the middle of the range. So basically, if it's so basically it is like 200 nits or 250 nits for respective models, which isn't that great in my like sort of experience. Even like this not particularly brightly lit room, you probably want your screen to be a bit brighter. So not sure, again, like those tests, like they're not particularly definitely sort of representative of like real world use, because usually people up their brightness quite a bit more than like just in the middle. So that's also sort of kind of weird, kind of shaky what they're doing there. One more thing, Thomas the Tech Chap had an interview with Apple representatives, and oh my god, they're dodging questions better than Neo dodging bulletin matrix. This is so insane. Like they didn't like give them tougher questions, to be honest. Like just a couple of them were like tougher questions, but they've dodged even those. Didn't want to talk about TDP of the chips, didn't want to talk about like clocks at which the this M1 chip will run, compared to different models, right? And it matters a lot, because if you're designing this chip to like run it, and it's the same chip to run in Mac Mini at like, I don't know, 3 gigahertz sustainably, that's gonna be one level of performance. But if you're gonna like allow this chip to run for at 3 gigahertz for like 10 seconds and in something like MacBook Air, and then clock it down like way to 1.8 or whatever, right? It's gonna be whole another level of performance. And because they're having these confusing messages on their website, purposely confusing messages, because they're showing you numbers at the same time, but those numbers are from different computers. It's all sort of really giant bullshit. One thing that we've sort of got an answer, at least, that apparently they're using low power DDR4, but which they've used in their computers before. But is it low power DDR4X, the same as is in this Intel chip that can run at like 3.7 gigahertz or maybe even higher? Because the Steam guy, he mentioned that they are using high bandwidth memory, but he didn't mention is it high clock speed memory. And again, what is high bandwidth memory? Based on like Anantech article, probably it is 128-bit, which isn't really that high bandwidth, to be honest, because most like GPUs now using 256 or higher bandwidth memory. But this Steam guy, he at least specified that they're sort of targeting the GPU, so the GPU has enough of memory bandwidth access. So maybe potentially we are facing like DDR4X memory at like higher clock speeds, but you know, who knows. And again, because they're using now only 16 gigs of memory, it means that it is shared with GPU, right? So if your GPU needs like 4 gigs of memory for some graphical intensive tasks, it means that your normal stuff is limited to just 12. And if you happen to, weirdly enough, I don't know why would you do this, but you went with like 8 gigs of memory, basically I think probably you can forget about any sort of heavy, like really heavy tasks, like video editing or whatever. I mean, maybe because they have this encoding engines as well, for what? For like video encoding and image processing. But again, like, we don't know what kind of video encoding is this. They didn't specify, as far as I know. So what are they encoding? What are they hardware accelerating? Is it like 422? Is it like ProRes? Is it like HEVC 10-bit 422? Is it 420 only? All of those things that matter for video people, none of those questions have been answered, basically, which is really Apple style, to be honest. At this point, I don't even know like why would anybody sort of make an interviews with them, because they're all just peddling their fucking bullshit marketing onto people and not answering any sort of real technical questions. It's just disgusting. I've seen a couple of those videos by this point, and it's like fucking annoying. Just one last thing. So apparently the GPU can perform 82 gigatexts per second and 41 gigapixels per second, right? And presumably, this is like at 10 watt. If that's the case, because that would be on par or like very close to gigapixel rate of RX 570 or Radeon Pro, like their top of the line 560M. The teraflops might not be there, but gigatexels and gigapixels, even if it's half, that graphics card runs at 50 watts and the desktop at 150 watts. So if Apple can do those kind of performances, half of the performance in gigatexels and the same in gigapixels, and maybe half of the performance in teraflops, but at like 10th of the power or 5th of the power, that would be really, really, really impressive. I'm not gonna lie. And again, the only thing kind of bothers me is that they're still sort of kind of in a way neglecting pro users and sort of leaving those things that would like pro and power users would want like answered. They're leaving them ambiguous. And also, again, some features are straight up missing. Like if there is no 2 monitor support for those MacBook Pros, at least for MacBook Pros, this is a no-go. This is just a glorified typewriter machine. Why would you spend like $1,800 when you spec it up to at least like 1 terabyte or whatever? It's like almost $2,000. With taxes, it's gonna be more than $2,000. Like, this is insane money if you can't even connect 2 monitors. So we're gonna wait and see how it goes. Hopefully Apple will either come out with like next tier of the computers, or they're gonna address all those things, like where is eGPU support, where are additional ports, why are you limiting this, why are you limiting that, and stuff like that. I'm gonna bet none of those questions will be answered, and we will just sort of have to deal with this. At least, hopefully, when the reviews are come out in like a week or even like few days by now, probably. Hopefully, at least we're gonna have answers what like codecs are accelerated by their hardware build accelerations, because then you sort of remove stress from GPU at least partially, and then you kind of probably you will be alright with those machines. But again, the questions about eGPUs and external monitors not answered. I don't know. In any case, yeah, that was quite a deep dive into this issue. I tried to make it succinct and kind of short, but we still got quite long video. In any case, if you liked it, please subscribe and share your opinions about this Apple products. Will you buy it? What kind of bothers you? What would you want Apple to do differently? And yeah, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and bye bye.